Well, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for coming to ACE NextGen's Women in Early Stage Investing and Diversity event. My name is CL Tan. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Women's Initiative, and I'm really excited to put on this event with the rest of the ACE team and some of our great sponsors tonight. And before we get started, I just want everyone to know that this is being live streamed. So if you're on social media and you want to share the link, it's bit.ly/ACENG 7/17/19 panel. Okay. And so welcome to everyone who's joining us online across the country. Thank you for being here. And I just want to say a couple things about ACE and then introduce our sponsors and then introduce our panelists, who I know that you came all the way from wherever you came from to see and hear speak. So ACE NextGen is an organization under the National Asian American Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship, and our commitment is to support the next generation of Asian-owned businesses, Asian Pacific Islander-owned businesses. And one of our commitments, we have two groups of businesses that we support: traditional businesses, Main Street businesses, as well as venture-backed businesses. So this event is really focused on that, because what we found is overall for Asian businesses, they're not funded as much, especially women-owned. So we really want to create some parity there and empower our members and others in our community. And then our other sponsor is the Affinity Project, and they're the ones hosting and sponsoring the live stream tonight. So they are a social platform that allows people to gather and have anonymous but intimate campfire conversations around shared content. So rather than having monologues in the way that current live streaming enables, people are actually able to have dialogue without the burden of kind of preemptively assuming what they can or cannot say with each other. The idea being to generate community conversations. So it's not necessarily relevant to people here, but everyone who's joining us on live stream, that's who you're working with. And the thing that you can to my very right, Baying Murphy. So she is the founder and principal at Pulse Ventures, which focuses on early growth stage enterprise tech focused companies. And prior to that, she actually launched this with some partners at Ascent Venture Partners, and has a long history in working in venture capital. In addition to that, because what I'm discovering is investors are very multifaceted individuals, and you'll hear more about that. She is also extremely committed to sustainable business practices. So she spends her efforts leading Net Impact, which is a nonprofit impacting that area, and is a docent at the Museum of Fine Arts, is on the board of the New England Venture Network. So maybe one day when we're at the MFA, we might see you. Give a tour? Yep, so don't be a stranger. And then we also have Jennifer Mendoza, who is the founder and general partner of Mendoza Ventures. And it's a Boston-based pre-seed fintech, AI, and cybersecurity venture capital firm. So for those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're really innovative and diverse team. And what we were sharing about and what I learned is that founders actually have a very different experience in working with them as they do with kind of your more traditional firm. And she is a published author, very committed to diversity. She speaks a lot. You might have seen her in other venture capital related events, and really thrilled to have her. So they're gonna speak a lot more to what it is that they're doing and on this topic. And really for tonight, the environment that I'm committed to creating is a really honest conversation. So imagine, it might take a little bit, but imagine that we're sitting in a very large living room with ducks up top, right, and a large TV. But really that's the kind of nature of conversation we want to have. And we'll start with some questions that I asked them, but we're quickly kind of transition to a back and forth Q&A with everyone sitting in. What we focus on
So focus for us is a really big word. It's really important. It's actually something that I advise a lot of the companies that I work with to do, is that you can do so many things. There's like a million different paths. They lead you to other million different paths. And I really truly believe that you can't be great at anything if you're trying to do everything. So especially when you're first starting out. But I think, generally, focusing on one thing and doing it really, really well is important. So our firm, Pulse Ventures, takes on that same philosophy, is that we only make one type of investment. And the type of investment that we make is early growth stage enterprise tech companies based in the Northeast. So there's a lot to unpack there. We oftentimes spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs trying to show them what we mean by early growth stage, all of those things, and we can get into that later. But that's what we do. That's all of us have done at the firm, and that's what we know best. So what that also means is that, if you're a consumer business trying to do a social media play, or a clean tech firm, like, I don't think we'd be the best investor for you. We don't do that type of stuff. So that's one thing. And then the second thing that is relatively unique for us is that we make really high conviction, concentrated bets. So instead of investing in a ton of companies in which I have to sit on 10 or 15 boards, instead we're being very disciplined about only investing in one new company per person per year. So our portfolio ends up being a lot smaller, but we get to spend a lot more time with our companies and our entrepreneurs. And because we're only investing in the Northeast, we're very close to them. And we think that, that's what allows us to get the sort of return profiles and risk profiles that we bring to our investors. So that's sort of a quick highlight on what we do.
Thank you.
I can't believe that this is the first time that we're meeting, because we do really similar things. So very similar, we do pre-seed and seed stage only. We are location agnostic, so our portfolio companies are right now in London, Portland, Maine, Austin, Texas, and Boston. Not all of them. And we have a small fund in terms of VC life, so we have a $10 million fund. And we have 3 general partners. So each general partner is usually in charge of about 4 to 5 companies at a time. We opened in 2016 with the investment thesis of proactively raising capital from sources that can help companies scale. So our LP base is largely experiential, and that's what we give our founders. So we give them the cell phone number of someone that scaled something similar 2 years ago, who's now an LP in our fund. And that we have found creates a very different dynamic, because the people who are coming in to help the companies literally have skin in the game. And it creates an atmosphere of camaraderie where people are all willing to roll up their sleeves and help each other out.
That was nice, to hear the depth of it. And now I'll just ask a more specific question along the lines of what we just asked. What would be kind of like a checklist that you would say that a company needs to have these things in order to apply, in order to have funding, that they are ready for it? So having an attorney is one thing, right? Having a clear sales strategy is another. Having a financial model that's actually, so that your metrics and KPIs are actually based on something rather than wishful thinking, right? Which happens a lot in startups. What are some of the things that you would say the company's ready, or you would have a conversation with the company and say you're not quite ready because this and this just needs to be there, and it's not.
It definitely depends on what stage you're at. So different stage of investor are looking for different things. So, and I would say that especially now that there's so much capital out there, there's probably an investor for almost every situation, right?
There's an investor for every situation.
You just kind of have to find them. Do you want to do your checklist first, and then I'll kind of tack on that? Since
I think it's always good to remember that VCs like to invest in companies and not ideas. Ideas are great, but that is for like your mom to invest in and not like your venture capitalist. Or somebody that loves you. Which we will, but not at the first meeting. I also think different VCs have different metrics at which point they feel comfortable investing. And so be aware of what stage you're at and how much of the company you're willing to give up at that stage in order to get the next round of capital in. But it's really by case, but we always like to see you talking to someone other than your close relatives into buying this. And we are very pre-seed, so I would say everyone else likes to see a good solid 10K plus MRR before you go to them. But we like to see like MRR. So some sort of, we always say that like we look for three things: product, market, and team. So like show me that the market can support it, show me that the product can support how many users you're talking about and that you've tested that out in some way, and that the team, there are these types of people that can scale something.
Yeah, and then typically investors at my stage, early growth stage, where you're looking for $3 to $5 million from us, or maybe you're doing a round of like 8 to 10 million and there's us and a co-investor, we're typically looking for $1 to $5 million in revenue. Any sort of technology or product risk is gone. So, or most of it is not there anymore because you've commercialized your product and you've successfully been able to sell your product to customers that are paying you money. So this is after like beta customers or, half developed sort of thing, right? So you've kind of started getting early product market fit. And so what a team typically looks like is an incomplete executive team. So you will typically have, for sure a CEO, maybe you'll have a head of sales, or you might have a CTO. Maybe both, but maybe not. And then after we invest, you're usually taking our money to kind of find those people and kind of build out your team. So you're kind of graduating from rock stars doing a lot of the work to, okay, this is something that I could hire anyone off the street that's a A or B player and they could do what I'm doing. At this point, usually companies have a part-time CFO, and then when we join, we'll typically ask them to hire a CFO. What else can I say? And then they're starting to try to like measure some of those front and back end unit economics and metrics and things like that.
You know how they say that 4 out of 5 startups don't get funded? That's at every stage. That's not in general for the funding that they need. That's 4 out of 5 pre-seed, and then again 4 out of 5 seed, and then 4 out of 5 A. So the metrics get more rigorous the further you go down, because if someone's writing you a $5 million check, they need to de-risk that investment for their investors. So there will be more intensive metrics at each stage.
Tell a story when he was trying to get fundraising, and he was, we talked about us with a couple people, and he got really incredibly demotivated. He's like, I'm trying to get to contact all these VCs, and nobody's returning our calls. And we're like, okay, how long have you been doing it? He's like, 2 weeks. And we're like, and we all start laughing because it's a process, taking forever. And like, so can you talk to us or give us like about the process and the timeline of how to get from getting that first phone call until like getting the check?
He must have had a very good childhood. He's like, Stanford was so easy. So I say it's a full-time job, 60 hours a week for a year to raise any amount of money. And then plan on that and prove me wrong. I've had one founder prove me wrong so far. It takes a year. Because you're infiltrating an industry that you know nothing about. There's a huge learning curve there. You're explaining a product in a new way. It's not like your sales cycle where you're like immediately recruiting like customers and taking a relatively small amount of money. You're explaining like a very risky proposal as in a de-risked way to an investment industry, which is a new skill. So there's a huge learning curve to that. It just takes a year to do it, I think. What's your timeline?
I don't know about timing. I've heard a year. I've heard at our stage, people doing it much faster. I think because also people are coming at it from different points, right? So I won't like dispute or argue with that. The only thing I'll add is that I think your like methodology for building your list and going through that process should kind of be the following. Like first, you should get introductions. You should go out to your network. Like I know building a business is literally you feel like you're begging all the time and asking for favors all the time to everyone. Like fundraising is no different. You gotta ask those favors. So go out to your network and try to get introductions into venture capital firms. And also like don't have your like best meeting first, right? So have some practice because your pitch is gonna get better over time. So that's sort of like the first round. And then you should start building your list and think about it like a sales process, right? So go out there, like it's very public what VCs exist because VCs market themselves, and research their websites and try to figure out, okay, these are the VCs that I think invest in my industry, my stage, my geography, all of those things. Build out that list. Go onto their website and see, okay, which person within this VC should I reach out to, right? Don't only reach out to partners. There are VCs out there that have non-partner folks who are very influential, will more likely talk to you than a partner will, but also talk to partners and make sure that those people are also aligned in your industry, your stage, whatever, especially for those big firms. Like you'll have partners that focus on different industries. Make sure you're talking to the right one. And then try to figure out you have connections into those firms. Like do that first. If you don't have any, then you gotta start cold emailing. Like I don't know what else to say. Like you gotta reach out to them. And like a sales process, you just hammer them, and there are different kind of methodologies to doing that. Oftentimes VCs write blog posts. You can reference a blog post, be like, hey, I love this post. Like, can we talk about this? Or something that they're particularly interested in, and try to get in that way. But I think it would be naive to say you can do this whole process with strictly warm intros. That would be nice, especially like with if you're a woman or if you're not white, like your universe is going to be smaller because like-minded people end up being together. So I think it's very naive to say like only depend on referrals to get in. Think about it like a sales process and just like get through your list, and then all you need at the end of the day is for one group to say yes, and you're golden.
And just like a sales process, they don't call it churn because it's not rote and repetitive. So you end up doing it a lot. And so like take the feedback from those meetings and turn it around as fast as you can. Like you said, a quick no is so much better. If someone's met with you twice and hasn't given you an answer, move on.
Yeah, and then if they say no, ask them for intros to other VCs. Make them feel
Or a
really
personal
bad.
check.
Be like, oh no, you wasted all my time. Who can I talk to? Intro me to somebody.
It works, we're human and we feel guilt.
Better yet, like if they tell you no in person, ask them in person for an intro. Like they have to say
Practice
yes.
the eyes, like the.
Any other question?
Can I ask a question from the like legal perspective? When you decide to invest in a startup business, do you tend to use your own in-house legal counsel, or you will let the startup founder use their outside counsel? And what is the interplay between the two parties about their different legal counsels?
Yeah, both are involved. So our lawyers work with their lawyers. Yeah, and sometimes after we've done the deal, we'll be like, your lawyers weren't very good. Let's upgrade your lawyers.
Yeah, that happens. I also usually recommend that the founder get a lawyer because you're hiring the lawyer for your company to look out for your company.
Yeah.
You also need someone to look out for you. Like, so we learned this one the hard way with our first startup because we didn't know about like the valuation and capital gains and that whole thing. And so we had to like create a trust for our shares in the company overnight because we did a next round of funding and the amount of money that we owned in that company had gone up, and so you get taxed. And we didn't know that, and we would have gotten hit with like a $40,000 tax bill, us personally, not the company, like our family that was like putting kids through preschool barely on a startup salary. So we found another cheaper lawyer and had had trust made like really quickly. So get a lawyer to look out for your interests as a founder as well, because you need to make sure that you're making healthy financial decisions for you and your community, whoever that is, as well as the startup.
So further to that, what about the founder? They just cannot afford any attorney, so they are asking you to help them to pay for the attorney fees.
Don't ever let a VC's attorney speak for you. It's worth, you're tripping over a dime to pick up a nickel, essentially. And there are a lot of very friendly law firms in Boston that are super aware of startups, and so what a lot of them will do, they will defer the costs until closing, so you won't have to pay the bill for the lawyer until you raise your funding round and close it. And then you pay the lawyer out of the money that you just raised.
We should be thinking to ourselves as VCs, what can we do to fix a little part of it? It won't fix all of it, but how can we make it slightly better? Having people at the firms writing checks that look like, what our population looks like is one of them. Encouraging VCs to do things to open up their pipeline is another one. There's all sorts of things that I think we can do, and I also think entrepreneurs can do things that try to help themselves. There's a study done where I think I'm gonna get part of this wrong, but I guess when VCs meet with males, whether the VC is a woman or a man, they tend to ask males questions that are more visionary, and visionary answers and questions tend to get funded. Whereas if a VC were to meet with a woman, they ask defensive questions like, why aren't you executing? Why are you so limited in your market size? And when pitches tend to be more defensive, there's a lower chance of them getting funded, right? And so knowing that data and knowing that whether the VC is a woman or a man, this is still the same pattern. Maybe as a founder, you can think about, okay, if someone's asking me a defensive question, there are things you can do to turn that around so that you're now talking about vision, you're not talking about the big idea. So I think everyone can sort of acknowledge that this is a reality, what can we do to give ourselves the best chance?
And that's really great. If there's any more of those kind of strategies or things to be responsible for, right, while you're out as a founder, if you guys can speak to that.
I'm working really closely with a female founder right now, and we've been in a couple pitches together recently. And our first 2 investments were male founders. One of them had a female co-founder, in my defense. And I'm bringing her to friends that have invested in our companies before, and I've noticed that the questions are different, and I've been floored by it because I was not expecting it. And so I think one of the things to remember is that most sexism is unconscious. I don't know a lot of men that get out of bed in the morning and say, I'm gonna really put a girl down today. Luckily for us, that is not a popular mindset. And so usually the people that you're talking to aren't aware that they're doing it. And so what we've done as a strategy is try and proactively educate them to where her company is at in comparison to other successful companies that they have invested in at the point at which they invested. So if you look at our MRR, we're right at the point that you invested in this other company and that was a really good deal for you. You should totally invest with us. That kind of pivoting it in that way has been really helpful to help them draw the parallels that they're not gonna do on their own.
So what were some of those questions that they were asked that you were surprised by? Can you give some examples?
She is a driven founder, and I've been asked by every single VC that we've met if she's too aggressive. And I was like, yes. Yes, she is. I love her. So am I. Have we met? And that was surprising to me, I guess. I was like, you're a VC. Why is this a question? You're obviously aggressive, too. That was one. And the defensiveness, I noticed. Instead of being good job, you got a customer, it's oh, your MRR is only here. And I was
Why don't you have more customers?
yeah, why don't you have more customers? I'm because her sales guy got hired 4 weeks ago and he barely knows where the bathroom is. That's why, give us 2 more weeks. talked about Greg, and I think that he's a really good example of this because I don't know if anybody here knows Alice, but it's ALYCE, and they're a corporate gifting company, and they're just cool. They were literally our first investment, so we have a really close relationship with them because we literally like grew up together. And so recently, what they do is they send you a corporate gift that's tailored to you. So they have an AI engine that searches you up on the internet, and like Charlotte, I'm gonna throw you under the bus. Let's say that I want to thank Charlotte for being an amazing intern, and I want to give her a gift. So instead of sending her like a basket of pears or something, it would Google Charlotte, and it would be like, Charlotte likes boats, and she works in Boston, and she's in college. So here's a back to school survival kit, and here's a cruise for 2 on Boston Harbor, and here's like a pretty picture of a boat for your office, right? So it's a tailored thing. They recently partnered with Artists for Humanity, and I'm going to forget, but there's another nonprofit that they partnered with that helps homeless and underserved population artists to do all of their gift boxes and things like that. And they don't know this, but my undergrad was in community action through artwork at UMass, and so I was like, yes! I was like, put that money to good use. And they also have a people first community that they've built that's been really beautiful to watch that core value grow in a really meaningful way.
Yeah. And so I think what I take away from your story is that she felt like a really personal connection to that company or that team or their mission. And so you guys should take advantage of the internet and figure out like what that personal connection might be between you and this VC, right? Like things are gonna resonate for different people for the most random reasons. At the end of the day, like business is very emotional. Like this happens in sales all the time. And so being able to make that connection with someone, like no matter how random it is, I think can really, really help you. For me, I have like 2 stories I can think of. One is this company based in New York called Splash. And you guys, I'm sure, have come across Splash in some way. They do these beautiful kind of landing pages. It's like an Eventbrite, but like beautiful landing pages. That's kind of the consumer-facing part of it. And for me, like I feel like a huge advocate and a huge cheerleader for this company because I actually tried to convince my prior firm twice to invest in it. And there are many reasons why we didn't, but one of which had to do with the fact that it's a relatively young founder, and it was kind of his first time doing that. And when I was interviewing to join the team that I'm with now, one of the GPs was like, "Oh, I'm so excited! I just closed this deal with this company." Loosely described, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's Splash!" And he's like, "Yeah, it is." And I was so excited, and so a little bit of that is like, I like had conviction. I knew it, and I like couldn't convince my prior team to do it. And now this team is, but also the other part of it is that this founder, he's really, really special. He's actually from Massachusetts, and he acts, like a very typical millennial. He's like, he has a million things going on. He like goes to Burning Man. He like, he like does all these like quirky things. And when you first meet him, especially, my GP who's in his late 40s with like kids and like a finance guy, they're like, how did he, meet this really young, like redheaded kid and say, okay, yeah, I can be his board member, I can work with him, but he did, and he believed in him, and I kind of felt like, yeah, like I believed in this kid could have been me, and so I feel that sort of like weird connection with him, and he's been incredibly successful. Like this company is crushing it, and he's built an amazing team around him. He knew that there were things that he just wasn't good at, for example, like detail-oriented, like analytical things. He just can't like pay attention for long enough to like do it, so he hired people who were amazing at that. And oftentimes, as companies kind of go through different stages, the founders are no longer the right people to be running the business. It's a very kind of natural thing. The whole Mark Zuckerberg thing is very rare. And so with this company, like, you probably wouldn't have been surprised if that's what happened, but it hasn't, because he's been very kind of self-aware. He's surrounded himself with people who complement him very well.
So I have a follow-up question. So when you look at teams or founders, what are the qualities that you value?
I think you hit the nail on the head with self-awareness. That's a big one. Like, you have to know what you're good at and what you're bad at, and be able to talk to people who are good at what you're bad at. And if you can't do those things, you should not be in a leadership position. You should just do something.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's huge. And also, we work with our founders for 3 to 6 months, and before we invest, and part of the reason that we do that is that time kind of tells all things. And so at that point in a startup, you've had at least one day go not the way you planned for it to go. And so we look at how they react to those conditions, and if their reaction is to blame it on the team around them, or we always say a bad sailor blames the weather, right? A good sailor makes it home. If they're gonna blame it on the weather instead of their own ability or their own ability to navigate the moment, then it's not a fit.
And in enterprise tech, for us, it's also, we don't tend to invest in folks who, college, really, really young, inexperienced. I think there's a lot of successful kind of founders and CEOs, particularly in other industries, where that works out, and that's great. I think in enterprise tech, when you're doing enterprise sales, there's a lot of value in having worked in a professional setting before, knowing how to interact with really large customers, right? You're this tiny startup, knowing how to interact with a big bank, for example. So having that experience and having experienced the pain of what you're trying to solve are things that we kind of generally look for. And then, close to what you're saying, we also end up spending a lot of casual time with the team. We'll do dinners, we'll do drinks and things like that, because we want to both understand where they came from, what their motivation is. I think that tells you a lot about a person, a lot about whether they can survive a lot of things that is going to happen when you're building a startup, and also how they are as a person. So, we're talking about all this stuff, and I'm realizing, oh my God, how does anyone get funded? Because you're just getting interviewed and inspected at every single point in time. And it's because this is like a marriage you can get divorced and get out of.
But you can't divorce the
You
startup.
can't divorce your VC. You really can't. They own a piece of you until you can make the money. So or the other way around. So
That's our new VC tagline. We own a piece of you.
it's scary, and then you give more and more of yourself away to other VCs. It's awful. But one anecdote is that we were very close to issuing a term sheet with a company, and so we had dinner with the CEO, as we usually do, and he was incredibly rude to the waitress. Just completely snapped at her, made a mountain out of a molehill, and that was enough for us to walk away. So just kind of think about that. For us, some people might think, really? It's an amazing company, what if it was the next, pick a company. If you look at, especially when you talk to VCs who have done this for 20 years, it makes a huge difference. And I will also tell you that for VCs, I've done this for a really long time, they would rather not get the big return on capital with a terrible person. They would rather get the lower multiple and work with someone that is a good human being to work with, because we're working with these companies for a really long time.
Are we telling horror stories? She's let's make it like a campfire, and I'm it was a dark and spooky night.
I think we would love horror stories. Yeah.
This was so I think part of what you're touching on too is that you end up being challenged together, and if that's someone who's gonna yell at a person, that that person's gonna be you or someone else in the company, and that just doesn't make like good companies. So we were about to invest in a company. They sent me the final like term sheet on Friday. I was reading it over the weekend, and it was 2 female founders. I was really excited. And they published a Me Too article over the weekend on their LinkedIn, and in the article, the CTO of the company had said, "We can't get funded because we're women." And I was like, I'm holding a term sheet, and you just publicly said that you can't fund your company. Like, well, now I can't fund you because A, you went rogue, and we're a team. Like, we work together with our companies. I was incredibly sorry that she had had the negative experience with other VCs in the past that she had. I hope that experience wasn't with us. I don't think it was. I was always with them. But it wasn't with us. And I also work with an army of really good guys. And she had been working with them too. And I could not invest in this company without implicating us or without implicating the male CEOs I had introduced her to support her. It was just a hornet's nest of issues. So I called them to talk this through, and they said, well, what would it take for you to invest? And I said, I think you'd have to fire your CTO, because this was not CTO-ish in the beginning. And second of all, if you're not, I understand if you're not willing to take down the article, it's your personal experience, but that article being up, I can't invest in you. You've put me in a position that I cannot write this check this weekend. And I was called sexist for not writing the check, which is fine, they might be right. I made the best decision in the moment that I thought for the entire company and our entire portfolio of companies. It may or may not have been the right decision. I think it was. But that was like the waitress situation where I was like, this is so telling, and I'm finding out now. And why? And also, like, we'd had so many good meetings. I was like, there are so many good guys, you know, like, I'm sorry that this happened, but write about the good ones too. You know, like, talk about the guys who also stepped in and tried to help champion you. And that was, because good and bad both happen in the world. And that was like gut wrenching.